Clocktower Academy. My name is DeAngelis, and on this episode, we are continuing our strategy guide series for the Trouble Brewing character roles with this episode on the Monk. My guest for this week's episode is Emma from Grim Scenarios and the TPI live streams. Emma honestly needs no introduction from me. Grim Scenarios is, I believe, the largest active Clocktower podcast that exists right now. So if you're looking for a podcast with a deep backlog as well as one that's going over the experimental character roles, which is something I'm not going to get to for a long time, definitely check out Grim Scenarios. Grim Scenarios also does live streams for Clocktower and other games. They have a pretty large community. Emma is also the host of the official TPI live streams on Sunday evenings. They're Sunday evenings for my time, at least. Definitely check those out as well if you haven't already. They're a lot of fun. I'll leave links to all of Emma's content in the description of this podcast, as well as links to all of Clocktower Academy's content. You can check us out on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, anywhere you get your podcasts, as well as Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. And we're going to be doing our own live streams soon. I'm going to be doing streams on Twitch, YouTube horizontal, and YouTube vertical, which is going to be very exciting, assuming my internet cooperates with me. We'll see. My first stream is going to be on Wednesday, April 1st at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. So if you're interested in playing some games, definitely hop in my Discord server. I just created a new stream squad role this week for anyone that is interested in being a part of those games, both as a player and as a storyteller. Because honestly, I don't need to storytell every game I play. We're probably going to start off with Trouble Brewing, but I'm going to be pretty malleable in the types of scripts that we're playing, as long as it's stuff that isn't too crazy, because I don't think I'm there yet. But anyway, yeah, I think that's going to do it for this intro here, guys. Have fun. Enjoy this Monk episode. Class is in session. Emma, welcome to Clocktower Academy.
Hi, Dylan. Nice to be here.
So today we're talking about the Monk, a Townsfolk from the Trouble Brewing script. Its ability reads, each night, starting on night 2, choose a player, not yourself. They're safe from the demon tonight. So let's start real simple here. And what does that mean exactly? What does it mean to be safe from the demon tonight?
Well, the fun thing is no one really knows because it's an undefined keyword. But in Trouble Brewing, it means the demon can't kill you. Kill the player you select.
Funny enough, I'm recording this after I recorded my Soldier Pod, which is worded similarly. And does this mean in scripts where the demon does more than killing, the Monk also protects players from that as well?
Yeah, we know it protects you from the Nodashi's poisoning and the Vortok's misinformation. The Puka's poisoning, the Vigor Mortis's poisoning. We know it protects from poisoning and misinformation. The extent of how far it might go beyond that in the weird scenarios is a question that is left open by the undefined nature of the keyword safe. So as a storyteller, if you're trying to use them on custom scripts where demons do things beyond kill and poison or cause misinformation, you're going to have to make a personal choice about what the word safe means, because there is not going to be a definitive answer for you.
Yeah, the Monk is a really cool character because if you're somebody that's coming from a mafia or werewolf background, this is a power that you're probably familiar with because those games, you know, the little bit of asymmetry that they have, the mafia games that I used to play would have a role called the Doctor, and the Doctor would wake up at night, they would pick somebody and they would save them. However, the Monk is like a watered-down version of the Doctor's abilities, namely that in Mafia, the Doctor could pick themselves, which the Monk cannot pick themselves. And in that, by the nature of the role reveal in that game, you would find out if you saved somebody because the storyteller, like the narrator or whatever, they would say, this person was attacked by the Mafia, but they didn't die, which is also not how the Monk works. The Monk, if nobody dies at night, the Monk is just one of the reasons it could have happened. So even if you select somebody and nobody dies at night, there's only a percentage chance that it was even you that did it.
Mafia is notoriously, at least in its in-person variant, I've heard on in text Mafia, which some people talk about, because forum Mafia on the internet is something of a subculture. This is not the same case, but in-person Mafia is notoriously an extremely good side favorite game, whereas Blood of the Clocktower is famously, Trouble Brewing in particular, is famously balanced to 50-50 over both TPI's internal playtesting data and what we know about it from public games in the wild now that it's released. It's proven to be 50-50 at a very robust level. And there's lots of reasons why that is. Most of them are orthogonal to the Monk, but the stuff like not having conclusive revelations of what has happened is a big part of what makes Blood on the Clocktower more fair to the minority team.
Yeah, it would be less interesting if it was a situation where you found out nobody died at night and it's because the Monk protected that person in particular, if the storyteller just went out and revealed that.
It's like one of those game mechanics that Bottom of the Clock Tower abandoned to create a more balanced game.
And so maybe we could just go over real quick here in the context of Trouble Brewing. What are the possibilities where nobody died at night? Is it something that happened on the very first game that I story told with my board game group? Is the monk protected somebody at night, and I said nobody died. Town, go off and do your thing, and they were super confused. So for any newer people, what are the possibilities in Trouble Brewing, at least, that nobody would die at night?
In Trouble Brewing, there's three possibilities, right? The monk can have protected the player who the demon attacked. The soldier could have been attacked, or the demon could have chosen to simulate one of those things by pointing at a dead body. I would say of those three things, I would say most of the time it's going to be a monk. Like monk is slightly more likely than soldier procs or imps sinking to simulate it. But
you think so? Maybe this is just like anecdotal, and I have like way less experience than any of the people that I've been talking to for this podcast. I feel like I see soldiers get hit more often than I see monks save people. But maybe that's just because like the soldier, you just have to like get yourself targeted. The monk, there's like that extra step of you have to pick the specific person. I mean, we'll go over in this podcast the strategies on helping like, make that probability better that you're going to target somebody. Maybe that's just something that comes with more experience, that your monks are able to, get their saves off easier.
Yeah, and I think like this might also be something that in person versus online, I think I've played a lot in both formats, but more online because it's, easier to find 12 people online, especially in the early days of Clocktower. Now I actually probably play about evenly in person and online, but in my Clocktower youth, I played a lot more online. The soldier is a character that is heavily incentivized to try to build up their trust with the good team pretty quickly. They're heavily incentivized to say who they are and what they're doing. They can do lies to try to get attacks, but if the soldier prevents evil from wiping out the good team. That's its main ability, right? It gets to final three. It ensures that a good player is let in final three. So you're much more worried about being executed as the soldier most of the time. So if a demon knows you're the soldier, generally they're not going to try to test that. And there's several, and like the spy might tell them you're a soldier. You might have told them you're a soldier. And even if they have like a poisoner and they think their poisoner might hit you, most of the time the poisoner is going to be looking for something better to do than poison kill a soldier. So I find like at some point eventually, it's not that soldier procs never happen, but my personal experience is over time soldiers become more honest, and that means demons are less likely to attack them. With monks, it doesn't really matter how honest they're being. Monks can always have the ability to proc, and frankly, the average game with either a monk or a soldier, neither does anything. That's something you have to understand with these roles. Most of the time, you're not going to have a direct mechanical effect on the game. You're most of the time not going to save anyone, yourself or someone else. And then in terms of demon sinking, which I think is probably the least common of these three, that's just a function of, because of content influence, people shoot for even player counts, particularly 12, much more than they shoot for the other player counts. Though in person, it tends to be whatever you get. And sinking a kill on purpose as the demon to sell a monk bluff is so many of the time you're giving the good team a whole other execution to do that, and it's frequently not a good trade-off for the evil team. So even demons that are bluffing monk pretty rarely actually want to give the extra execution.
Yeah, I remember when I first told my group that I run out of my apartment here that the demon could even target a dead body. They were like, "Oh, we didn't know that." So
yeah,
I guess that's not what happened last night.
It's not intuitive, and it's not intuitive, so you don't think of it naturally as a demon. You have to start thinking about Clocktower a lot to even think about the fact that you can do that. And then if you're thinking about that Clocktower at that level, you're probably going to say, wait, why am I giving the good team an extra execution when 7 out of 10 games with the monk doesn't do anything anyway?
Yeah, that's definitely been the majority of my monk games so far, is that the storyteller's wrapping up and they're like, this person is the monk. They didn't save anybody all game. And that feels a little bad because I think the monk is considered a fairly good role to have for the good team. And it's a role that if the demon is able to locate the monk, the demon's going to try to kill the monk as early as they can, because like I mentioned at the beginning, the monk can't save themselves. I think it's actually like kind of a nerf to the monk that they can't pick themselves. I wonder if that's like something that came up in playtesting or something like that, that the monk was too strong if they could target themselves.
Yeah. Here's what I would say about that. And it gets into something that I know is I've put onto our outline for the man strategies is a monk save going into Final 3 is one of the most backbreaking things that can happen to an evil team. Like, if you go to bed with 4 people alive and wake up with 4 people alive because the monk has saved someone going into Final 3, it's really bad for the evil team. And it then sort of forces the demon to kill the monk at that point, which, if they know who the monk is rough, but it also means there is someone the demon wanted to kill more than the monk at that stage. So it's not so much that the monk is doing nothing when it doesn't protect anyone, is that it's forcing players that the demon... It forces a player that monk thinks the demon should want to kill to stay alive instead of another player. And if the monk dies night 2, so that the fortune teller can get an extra night of information, or the confirmed virgin can be alive later in the game in Final 3, so you have reduced execution space, the monk has done something, even if it hasn't protected anyone. And that's, like, I think an important way of thinking about the monk is you're not just trying to get saves, is you're trying to warp who the demon is killing.
Yeah, so I think that Trouble Brewing is a really cool script where there are several pairs of characters that are good mirrors of one another. Obviously, you have the recluse and the spy, and you have the drunk and the poisoner. And I think that the monk is a really good mirror for the imp, because the imp starting on night 2 is waking up and they're choosing somebody to kill, and the monk starting on night 2 is waking up and choosing somebody to save. And, you know, by that theming, it makes sense that the monk is picking a different player, because most of the time the imp is picking somebody that's not themselves.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah, so I think, like, if the monk... So get back to your original question about the monk picking themselves. If the monk could pick themselves, they could just pick themselves every night until Final 3.
They could functionally turn into like a soldier.
Yeah, they could functionally turn into a soldier and then do the super powerful monk thing of late game kills when it's much easier to guess who the demon's going to want to kill, which is would be something that'd be very hard for the evil team to ever deal with. You need a poisoner, and you need to waste a poison kill on the monk, which you don't want to waste a poison kill on a character like the monk. You want the poisoner to be making the empath or the fortune teller, the undertaker, get false information. That's generally the poisoner's highest value thing in the game, besides destroying night 1 information, which they have to do randomly. So, like, it's not like the poisoner can think about that. So, like, you wouldn't want to waste a poison kill on the monk. And if the monk could pick themselves, it could force that situation.
Yeah. Speaking of drunk and poison, the monk is actually one of the best characters in regards to being able to identify whether or not they're drunk or poisoned.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you pick somebody at night and then you wake up and that person's dead, you know something happened there.
Yeah, essentially, the soldier are essentially the only characters in Trouble Brewing who can know for certain that their information was poisoned or drunk specifically, which is very powerful, which is another, like, subtle thing about the monk is you don't need to save someone. Learning that a poisoner is definitely alive and in play, or that you're the drunk, super useful.
Yeah, it's a really cool character, and I'm excited to like dive into it in this podcast, because I think there's like a lot of different directions you can go with the monk, and I always find that those are the most fun characters, is the ones where you can kind of choose your own adventure a little bit game to game.
Yeah, it's definitely something that lets you think about the game differently, which is something I always look for in a character. There's some characters with extremely straightforward play patterns. The washroom and the librarian, for example, have super straightforward patterns. They learn a good player. They want to protect that good player. There's very little reason for the washroom and the librarian to do anything else other than protect the player they learned. The monk has a lot of different choices on how they can approach things.
Yeah. So let's talk about the different ways that you could kind of go about trying to play as the monk. I came up with 3 of them. I don't know if there's any like major play patterns that you've noticed in like games that you've played, but the first one is kind of like trying to cosplay as a good version of the demon and just trying to get in the head of the demon, think, who would they try to kill tonight based on the information that's been out publicly in town? And then I'm just kind of going to guess at night to try to like protect somebody. I'm going to try to protect somebody every night this way.
Yeah, I think in terms of your mechanical role, that is the principal way you're going to play monk. Is to play monk well is like every group is going to have a different sort of meta that's arisen based on who the demon is, but also the group as a whole, about how demons kill in that group. And as the monk, you want to try to get in that headspace. And if your group has metas where some demons like killing certain types of players and other demons like killing other types of players, like you can also sort of figure out if your intuitions about who the demon is correct by saying, okay, I think John likes to kill the confirmed players quickly. Bill is scared of the ongoing information and likes to try to kill them quickly. So if I protect the ongoing information and it works, the demon's more likely Bill. If I protect the confirmed player and it works, the demon's more likely John. So it's like knowing your group well and knowing how they think and how they work is going to help you think like a demon. I think that, and it's always going to be different. Like the demon is going to kill differently based on what they know about the game, who they are as a person, how the group thinks, and what people have said publicly. And you want to, and this is like something that's trivially true of all Clocktower characters. But the Clocktower characters that don't get information of their own, like the monk, it's even more true of, which is you need to be actively listening to people. You need to be talking to people. You need to be trying to figure out not only what they know, what they believe, who they trust, because these are all things that the demon's are going to be thinking about in terms of who they want to kill. And you want to be thinking of those things too. And you're not going to have your own information that will let you make these decisions directly. So you're going to have to talk to your group and figure out how they are thinking about these things.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing that I'm starting to notice because in my local meetups here in Philly that I go to every week, I'm always at the Trouble Brewing table, even though I've been going for 2 months now, and most people would be at like the intermediate or the custom tables at this point. We get like 50 people a night at the Philly. It's crazy. There's some
I've
people
heard Philly has a good scene right now.
Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah, you can kind of identify sometimes, like if the demon is a brand new player or if the demon seems like they're a bit more advanced in their thinking based on who they're executing at night, based on how they're killing at night. And like this past week, I had a game where I was the imp and I tried to flip it on its head a little bit. And I was trying to simulate a new player as the demon. And it kind of fooled one of the other guys that I've played with a few times at that Trouble Brewing table, because he was like, I didn't think it was you. I thought it was one of those new people. And
yeah,
as the monk, you can kind of do that, but for the good, the good side of things, and try to like figure out, okay, so they killed the washerwoman on night 2. Is that something a newer demon would do, or is that more of, an advanced level kill that a demon would go for? Are they targeting confirmed players, or are they intentionally trying to find those powerful players early to knock out of the game?
Yeah. And yeah, like this is going to be extremely group meta dependent. I can't give you a one-size-fits-all answer to what you should be doing as the monk, because who you're playing with is going to affect these things a lot.
The other big way that you could play the monk is you want to find one of those big, powerful, ongoing information role characters and just glue yourself to them if you can. Because like you said, even if the demon never targets the Undertaker at night, you can essentially be like the Scarlet Woman of the good team and just be there as the insurance policy and be like, okay, maybe I never proc, but I'm here if something does happen, and I can keep that powerful information role alive as long as I can.
Yeah. I would caution against leaning into that too heavily. There's always going to be a time where it switches from you wanting to protect the powerful information roles to protect the players that can't be framed. Like, if you think about it, going into Final 3, you'd much rather have the Virgin than the Undertaker alive, because the Virgin is never the demon if they procced. Whereas the Undertaker could be the demon with a good bluff or a spy helping them make a good bluff. And the Virgin can never be. So, backing up the powerful information roles, I think, is a strong early game strategy, but but at some point you want to get to the point where everyone knows this player is good. This player can't be the demon. Where we force the demon to reduce worlds more than they want to if we keep this player alive. And I think as the monk, you generally want to do that in the late game. Information in Clocktower is front-loaded, and it becomes reducing in value over time. The Undertaker is strong, especially on day 1, after the day 1 execution, when a lot of people don't know people's claims. On day 5, when we're going into the final execution, the Undertaker's just going to be telling you something you already know.
Yeah, it's diminishing returns. How often are you getting reveals of information that's really sending shockwaves through town?
There always becomes the turning point where confirmed good players are more powerful than squeezing one more piece of information out. Where that comes depends on the particular form of the game, how it's going, but you should always try to make sure you're not chasing glory by protecting the fortune teller so long that you can't do something even stronger.
Yeah, and the last like basic advice I had for Monk, based just on the games that I've played so far, is that you're a very high priority target for demons. If a demon finds out that there's a monk out there and they have a suspicion that it's you, you're probably not going to stay alive very long, because like we are talking about before, monk can't save themselves, especially on that night too. You can just basically take the monk out of the game before they're able to do anything. And that's going to be very advantageous for the demon. So you're going to want to not let that happen.
Yeah, I think like that is definitely one way to approach it. I would say, though, that it's not a necessity of playing. If you know that your demon likes to kill monks, if you know your group, the monk, they like to kill monks, you can lay low. You can also draw the kill. Like, you being killed, would you rather, you are always preferring you get targeted in the fortune teller. That's why you pick the fortune teller, right? So it's a choice you can make with how you want to play the game.
That's true. Yeah, you can kind of think of it as maybe you get killed on night 2, but that's a night that a strong information character isn't dying.
Exactly. The other way I have found a lot of success with playing Monk is it's a bit of a one that it's, I guess what you would say, a high risk, high reward way of playing Monk, which is you behave outrageously and trick the demon into framing you. This is the as far opposite as you can get from laying low. This is essentially playing as a good Baron. And that means you lie a bunch, you get to be chaotic, you get to convince the demon that they want to frame you. And the reason you can convince the demon that they want to frame you is that then they won't be attacking you at night. You can still do all your normal protection things. And then you get to the end game. And the demon has been you've successfully tricked the demon into trying to frame you. And they don't attack you because they are trying to set up a world where you're the alternative demon candidate. And who else is alive with you? Maybe it's the Ravenkeeper, maybe it's the soldier, maybe it's the washerwoman confirmed empath. There's all these other characters that could be alive that the demon's gonna need to kill going into that end game. And then suddenly you're there. Because the demon has committed to framing you because you've been behaving in a frameable way the entire game. And you stop the demon. I played a game once where the players alive were the demon bluffing soldier, me the monk, the Ravenkeeper, and the Undertaker who everyone trusted. And I essentially baited the demon into framing me without ever telling anyone I was the monk. I protect the Undertaker who the demon knew they needed to kill going into Final 3. And the demon then wakes up the next night with no one dies and reluctantly kills the Ravenkeeper the next night, who then checks me and sees monk. And it's just a disaster for the demon, right? Like, the fortune teller and the empath are strong at the start of the game. The monk is strong at the end of the game. So if you can trick the demon into bringing you to the end game by making yourself frameable, which is, I think, in many ways the opposite of laying low, you can do some really powerful stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely some high level strats. Let's get into protection, right? If you're a new player and you pulled the monk token, you're looking at this long list of characters, and you're like, shit, I don't know. What are the good ones? What are the ones that I'm looking for? If I'm just talking to random people, if I'm doing 3 for 3s, what are the names that I'm looking for that people are bringing up that I am probably going to be interested in targeting them if I'm doing a strategy based on targeting roles and not like, social based protection? Like, is something that can come up in like my games where people go, oh, that's Dylan. That's the guy with the podcast. He's always at the Trouble Brewing table. Just kill him early so we can get him out of here. We don't care what he is. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about, like, if we're doing role-based protection, what are we thinking here? And for anybody watching this on YouTube, I have like a little breakdown of this is what I think, who to protect, who not to protect. I know you have additional notes on here, so I'm just going to let you run with this. What are your thoughts on what your direction is here?
Yeah, it's always going to depend on what has happened so far in the game. I think the only character who I never want to be protecting is the Raven Keeper, because that's just mean to the Raven Keeper.
Yeah, you're just taking away their ability.
I think it's really going to depend on the game state, how many players are alive, what has happened, and what sort of game it seems to be to determine what roles I want to protect. On a baseline level, sure, I'd rather protect a fortune teller than a chef.
Yeah, so the ones that I put down here on my little chart is that you have the big 3 ongoing information roles of the fortune teller, undertaker, empath. Those are characters that typically you want them to be alive as long as possible, but like you were saying earlier, there is eventually going to be diminishing returns on the information that they're getting, especially in the case of something like the empath, who their neighbors don't change the entire game. They're getting identical information unless, they get a different number one night and then all of a sudden it's interesting. You also have the Slayer, which the Slayer could just win the game. So, if you can get a Slayer to the final 3 with Monk Protection, that's pretty good because you're putting them into a 50-50 shot of, hitting their shot. And then, for who not to protect, I had those first night information characters because their ability's over, so they don't have anything additional they're contributing outside of just being alive. And you have the soldier, soldier definitely doesn't need your help staying alive from the demon. And then, Raven Keeper, because that's not fun. And then the mayor has their own ability that can also prevent them from dying at night, so they don't need your protection unless they're getting... Yeah. So those are just my idea. There's obviously several other factors involved, and then outside of just saying, okay, that's the Undertaker, I'm going to protect the Undertaker that game. But, like I've said in other pods, you could absolutely do that and it be viable. If you just don't want to overthink it and latch yourself to the Undertaker the whole game, you'll probably be okay.
Yeah. I would say, like, in terms of role-based protection, the benefits of, like, letting a chef die at night is chef numbers are extremely powerful, and players who die at night are normally good with trustable information.
Players that die early in the game, at least at night.
Yeah, especially early in the game. So, like, if the chef dies night 2 and their information is probably super reliable at that point, that gives you a major heads up to solving the game. So I'd say early in the game, role-based, I probably would want to find a fortune teller or an empath, but it's really going to depend on what's going on. The Virgin is someone who I will always protect if I have nothing better to do, because I know they're good and I know the demon can't frame them. So if a Virgin has been confirmed and I don't have something better to do that night, the Virgin is going to be who I protect. The Mayor is an interesting one. If you read the Mayor's Almanac, what it says is the Mayor should almost always stay alive, unless them staying alive is going to make it impossible for the evil team to win the game. So the Mayor doesn't need your protection, except sometimes they do. If they've gotten to that point where the evil team is never going to be able to overcome the Mayor win for whatever reason, at that point, the Mayor's a pretty good protection, because if you can protect the Mayor into Final 3, once they've sort of, at least if you're running it according to the Almanac, lost their protection, they become the best protection in the game. The reason they've lost their protection, according to the Almanac, is it's become clear to the storyteller that good will go for the Mayor win no matter what, because they overwhelmingly trust the Mayor. At that point, the Mayor becomes the best protection in the game. So
yeah, you can also protect the Mayor if you're worried about a poisoner. If you think that demon and poisoner are trying to double into the Mayor because they are foreseeing an issue with a Mayor win forthcoming, you can get in the way of that, because you're not the one that's poisoned, it's the Mayor. You can still protect the Mayor in that situation.
Yeah. So my personal list is, if I have nothing better to do, the Virgin. If I have a fortune teller who I think has been a little too public and a little too trusted earlier, I'm probably going to go with the fortune teller as my number 2. And then my number 3, it's really going to be game dependent. If I have a lot of claims day 1, and it's a game that should have 2 outsiders, and there's only 1 outsider claim, then that outsider is basically a Virgin, and they are going to shoot at my protection list. If there's 4 outsider claims, or 3 outsider claims, outsiders are going to shoot way down my protection list. It's very hard just to go based off of roles for me as the monk. You need, without talking about the specific game, but going just off of roles, probably a Virgin who is procced is number 1, then a fortune teller or Slayer is number 2 or 3, and Yeah, and then it gets very hazy after that.
So let's talk about the Virgin real quick, because I put it in my who not to protect section, and it sounds like that might be wrong.
Well, wrong is
I mean, let's just dive into it. So, say you have a confirmed Virgin on day one. And for anybody that's listening to that, it means that the Virgin was nominated by a townsfolk, and that townsfolk died. They got executed, and it ended day one. And so, in the night now, whoever the demon is, the demon knows that there is a confirmed Virgin. And town knows that there's a confirmed Virgin. There's no other ability on the Trouble Brewing script that does what the Virgin does and kills somebody during the day. So from the demon's perspective, that Virgin is kind of a problem, right?
Yeah.
Because it is a confirmed good character that will never die during the day. So the two options are the Virgin's making it to final 3, or you're killing them at night at some point.
Yeah, and I don't want to say there's wrong. Like in Clocktower, everything's about trade-offs. There's trade-offs in literally every choice I've ever made as a Clocktower. And how you value those trade-offs is going to be very much dependent on who you are as a person, what your group does, how your group thinks. But I personally put a high value on confirmation. I place a high value on people and roles that help me eliminate worlds. So if the fortune teller can always be the imp bluffing fortune teller, the Virgin can never be the imp bluffing Virgin if they've gone off. So if I am not sure about the fortune teller, if I think that's a bait claim to get my monk protection, I learn a lot more if I protect the Virgin and the fortune teller dies than I do if I protect the fortune teller and the Virgin dies. One of these things tells me something important about the game, which is the demon was scared of that fortune teller, which means their information is probably pretty reliable. And that's, for me, that's a trade-off I'll accept. I'll accept losing the fortune teller, having higher trust in their information, and keeping the Virgin alive. The converse a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. But that's how you should be thinking about a lot of the time is, what do I get out of this protection? What do I learn from this protection? The demon is always going to be attacking the Virgin at some point. They're not a player the demon wants in Final 3. Most of the time. Sometimes the demon gets distracted from remembering to kill the Virgin, and then they find themselves in a situation where they have to let the Virgin into Final 3. And I've never seen a demon be happy about that. So
yeah, it's interesting because like when we're talking about new players or people that are like getting into Trouble Brewing, from the demon's perspective, I found that newer demons tend to target those confirmed good characters, or as far as people can be confirmed outside of the Virgin. So if you have a chef that's come out with information or a washerwoman that's come out with information, I found that newer demons will target those players instead of taking the risk of hitting a Raven Keeper or hitting a soldier early or something like that, or mare bouncing onto another character that they weren't intending to kill. And as the monk, like we were talking about earlier, trying to put yourself in the shoes of that demon. If you get that confirmed Virgin on day one, how likely do you think the demon is going to immediately go at that Virgin, or do you think they're going to skip a night, or they're going to skip 2 nights? It's just it's a conundrum, and that's like your whole role is trying to figure that out.
Yeah, and it's so group meta dependent. I have seen I think like my perspective on like the Virgin being killed quickly is it's almost sort of like the stupid internet meme where that you have the smart person and the stupid person on one side, both saying the same thing, and then the person in the middle saying the complete opposite, where super players who have been playing Clocktower forever and players who are just starting will both kill the Virgin, and then the people in between will be trying to outthink themselves into killing something else. But that's just my meta. Like that's just the meta I've seen. Like that doesn't mean that's the meta everywhere, and that doesn't mean it's the true meta or the correct meta. It's in the groups I play with, in the games I play, I'm frequently going to be able to get saves off if I protect the Virgin, much more frequently than if I protect the player who told me they were the fortune teller. But if your group meta is different, you want to be protecting the fortune teller.
And the funny thing is from the demon's perspective, if the person that they picked didn't die at night, the demon is not always going to know if it was a monk or a soldier.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to make that calculation of, can I pick the same person again tomorrow night, or do I have to swap off to another target? I would guess that most demons are not going to double into that same person, or, maybe they recruit their poisoner to like help them out with something. because that's like a huge risk if you get 2 saves in a row. That's like game changing there. It's like really going to screw up the evil team.
Yeah, and if you're playing a quiet monk strategy and you get a success and you wake up with no deaths and the next night you wake up dead, that can tell you with pretty good confidence that it's a spy game and the demon has deviated from whatever original plan they had because they're annoyed at you, that's very useful information.
Yeah, if you're lying low and you just immediately get sniped on night 2 without ever intimating to anybody that you're the monk, you could definitely suspect that there's some spy shenanigans going on, because like we were saying before, the monk is higher on the kill priority early in the game. If the imp had the spy ability, if the imp could see the grimoire, who would they be targeting on those early nights? Getting the monk out of the way early is pretty nice. The other thing I wanted to talk about here is this idea of frames. You've been talking about it a little bit here, and I just wanted to dive into that deeper for people that might not be familiar with that verbiage in reference to clock tower play. Jen and I talked about it a little bit in our How to Play as Evil episode, that it's not just the evil team wants to get the demon to final 3. They usually want to set it up so that there is a good player that the rest of town thinks is potentially the demon. And oftentimes evil strategy comes down to just, convincing 1 or 2 good players to vote with them at final 3. And that's all they're going to need. And so I'm assuming that's what you mean by a frame, is that a frame is a person on the good team that evil team is trying to frame as a potential demon.
Yeah. I have some essays I've worked on in Clocktower, including a How to Play as Evil essay and a draft How to Play as Good one that I've been too lazy to finish for the separate months. But the idea I try to hammer home through my How to Play as Evil one is your goal as evil is to win the war of making sure the demon is never executed, which means that you need to make sure at all stages in the game there is someone that the majority of players who are good will want to execute for. And this is the frame. And evil can mess up when they execute a frame too early and it breaks worlds. Like if there's a player who has to be the demon or the fortune teller and you execute them with 7 alive and the game doesn't end, it can really put evil into a tricky situation where, yay, we got the fortune teller executed. But it means the demon's being killed tomorrow because now the fortune teller is not the demon. We can conclusively rule that out, which means their information saying the demon is good. But so the evil team, if they're thinking about the game at the deepest levels, is going to be working the entire game to grow and cultivate their frames, grow and cultivate the players who they can convince the good team to be suspicious of, because either the good team's already suspicious of them, or because the evil's doing a good evil team's doing a good job of selling fake information or whatnot. And as the monk, like if the fortune teller is going to be executed tomorrow because they're not trusted, because they almost got executed today, and a lot of players seemed annoyed they weren't executed and said, we're getting you tomorrow, which is something that happens. The demon's probably not going to kill them that night. They might to fake a star pass, but even that's interesting. They're probably killing someone else, in which case you don't need to protect the fortune teller. They're either evil or being framed, and they're going to be executed tomorrow anyway. So the demon's probably not killing them. Why bother? And if the demon's not going to kill them, why are you protecting them?
Yeah, because the whole point of your ability is to protect players that you think the demon's going to target at night.
Yeah, so thinking about, so you as the monk, so I guess, what I mean is, when you're as the monk, you want to think, okay, who does it seem like people think might be evil? Who does it seem like people think is good? Who does it seem like that both sides are sort of trying to throw shade on, but not get executed? Is the most beautiful frame jobs do that. The most beautiful frame jobs are you sort of set someone up as a demon candidate slowly over the course of the game, but never quite enough to get them executed, and you just drag them along, and then bring them to final 3. And then it's like, hey, this person, a lot of people have been suspicious of them all game, who have never quite been able to get to the votes. You don't need to protect that person, no matter what their role is. That person's gonna survive because the evil team is trying to frame them, and that means they're gonna look sort of demon-y. And the demon is also gonna look sort of demon-y. And there's reasons to try to protect people who are looking sort of demon-y. If you think someone's a demon who's about to star pass, you can protect them, that is useful, but if someone's gonna be executed tomorrow, because they're being framed, because their information is being pushed on. The demon's probably not going to want to kill them, which means they're probably going to want to be killing someone else, which means they don't need your protection, whether they're good or evil.
So the big thing to take away from this part of the podcast is don't protect the frames.
Yeah.
Protect the non-frames. You want to protect the good players that evil goes, we're never going to be able to convince town that these players are evil. We got to get rid of them at night.
Yeah. And in the early game, evil won't really know their sense of their frames are. So it makes more sense to just protect the fortune teller claim and see what happens. If it's like 7-8 players live in a 15-player game, and you've had 3 conversations with 3 different people over the past 2 days saying, hey, I'm a little not convinced by Jane's fortune teller information. It seems a little off to me. Okay, Jane's probably getting executed. She doesn't need your help anymore.
Yeah, those executions that need to help inform town of what kind of world they're in, because at a certain point you start going, okay, we've got 3 potential demon candidates. We're going to execute one of them right now because the game's over. So
we're going to execute one right now. We're going to execute the other tomorrow, and we're going to see what happens if the game doesn't end with those 2. Great.
Yep.
You don't need to protect the one they're executing tomorrow, no matter how powerful their claim is. It's not who the demon's going to kill most of the time, Star Pass situations aside. And it can be fun to block Star Pass.
Let's go into advanced considerations. So we talked about a little bit here that, yes, you can use your ability on the imp, and it prevents the imp from star passing off itself, which is really cool. If there's a player that has a ton of suspicion on them at some point in the game, and, you know, it's an imp that's backed into a corner, they're probably going to want to star pass. I know that that's something that I've done as the demon. If I think I might get executed tomorrow, star pass ain't a bad idea. And I have the monk, you can say, that ain't happening. You're staying alive, pal.
Yeah. Yes. It can be very funny. It can also be very unfortunate when it happens accidentally early in the game. There are some demons who like to do a nice cheeky little early game star pass before there's any suspicion on them so they can sell their information better. I've done it. I've seen it done a lot. Stopping that star pass can be very awkward because that player looks super good.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing that I want to talk about in this section was, you know, you save somebody at night. Do you go up to them that next day and say, hey, I saved you last night as the monk? Or because you don't know if it was your ability that did it, that's just kind of something that you're keeping to yourself and maybe you'll reveal that later?
It really depends on how I'm feeling like I'm playing that game. If I'm doing what I call my Captain America gambit, I'm probably never going to tell them I saved them. And my Captain American gambit is that on Final 4, I know the demon's trying to frame me. I protect the player they want to kill. Then when we wake up, I say, I can do this all day. And we go back to sleep and I do it again. But if I'm doing that, I don't need to talk to them. Like, it's beyond, in fact, I don't want to talk to them. I have no interest in trying to look like the monk until I need to look like the monk. But if I'm trying to do something more normal, yeah, they were protected. They're probably good, which means they were probably the player who was protected. It might have been a soldier situation, might have been a sync, but like this gets it a little into meta the storyteller, which some people will tell you not to do, but
No,
it's fine.
I'm
like
the worry information from me to meta the storyteller. I freaking love it.
Storytellers don't like putting both monks and soldiers in the bag if they can avoid it.
Absolutely. That's absolutely something that you can think about, is that what are the chances that they put both in the bag?
They will, and sometimes you'll get this meta wrong, but a lot of the time, like you, by seeing that you have the monk token, can suspect there isn't a soldier in play, which means that the fact that no one died makes, from your perspective, it look much more like a monk save. Which means, yeah, this person probably has something useful to tell you. So if you're playing a normal game, I would suggest trying to talk to them. Maybe to don't run off to them because you have done something powerful, which means the evil team's going to want to kill you. If you can sneak in and grab them at some point during that day, or even the next day, this is someone who you can probably want to know what's going on with.
Yeah, we talk about it a good bit in my soldier episode that I've already recorded before we recorded this. We talked a lot about, role swapping, and the monk and the soldier, if they can find each other and they're in the same game and one of them is not an evil player, then it's just a monster combo. because like we said earlier, the demon wants to target the monk, and if they go to hit that monk and they don't die at night, they're going to be kind of confused what's happening.
I would, role swaps are always interesting. I try to avoid predictable role swaps because I'm me, and I don't want demons reverse engineering my claims through what I'm claiming. But for other people who are not me and in different groups where there aren't predictable role swaps, like, it's a good one. Raven Keeper's also a good one for the monk in that sort of same theory.
Finding a player that wants to get targeted at night and just swapping with them. In the very first game that I story told, we had the monk that protected somebody on night 2, and then he went to his buddy who was the demon claiming soldier, and they did a role swap with each other, and it really screwed the monk because we're going back to like metaing the storyteller. How often are they putting both in the bag, and how often are they putting one in the bag and then the other one is a demon bluff? And so if you're a monk and you can somehow find somebody that's willing to tell you they're the soldier, how often are you even going to believe that?
Yep. But it can be more interesting to roll swap with an evil player than a good player sometimes.
Oh, that's getting a little fancy with it.
Like, this is an interesting thing about Blood on the Clock. If you tell 2 people the truth in your game, so like if you talk to, because what I see, especially with newer players, is they'll tell one person the truth, and then they'll tell 1 or 2 people the truth, and then they'll go around to everyone else and say like, hey, I'm one of these 3 or 5 roles, or I'm on this side of the script. Evil players talk. Evil players share what they know about the game, and from a percentage chance, if you've told 2 people the truth, you've told the evil team the truth, because there's at least a 50% chance that one of those players is evil on any given player count. But if you only talk to 1 player, that chance is much reduced. And if you roll swap with them and then you die when no one knew that you were a character the demon wanted to kill, like the monk, except for that 1 player you roll swapped with, that suggests something went weird with that roll swap. Whether it's the player you were talking to was evil, or the player you're talking to leaked the roll swap to someone else, it's information.
It's one of the biggest things that I've learned so far in like my brief experience playing Clocktower. And I've played a lot of Clocktower games now in the span of like a couple months, as I've been essentially research games for this podcast. And at first I was somebody who was like, when I was a good player, I was very cagey with information because I was always afraid that I was going to run into an evil player. And I'm like, I don't want to give the evil team stuff to work with. And now I understand that it doesn't really matter sometimes if you're telling an evil player your information is a good person, because if it's clear that that information was used in a way that's beneficial to the evil team later on, then you can, backtrack that back to the one guy that you talked about on day 1 and go, that's kind of suspicious. And that guy's still alive. That's interesting.
Yeah. It's always tricky. But I think role swapping with soldiers is fun. If you're the monk, whether they're good or evil, you learn something from it.
Absolutely. Yep. You also wrote down that monk gets stronger as the game goes along. It sounds like there's some shenanigans you can get into at Final 4.
Yeah.
If you're still alive and you're sober, that you can kind of like mess with the demon even more.
Yeah. I think in most games, like the final 4 kill the last kill, it tends to be overdetermined. By which I mean there's a player who everyone knows is going to die at the final night of the game. It can be for different reasons. Sometimes it's because it's the virgin. Sometimes it can be because it's a 2 outsider game and they're the only outsider claim. Sometimes it can be because everyone trusts them and you can tell that and no one is interested in executing them. Protecting that player there is easy. It's trivial. You don't need to think about it too much. It's the player who was very obviously going to be killed tonight is frequently clear going on the last kill of the game. It's almost never clear on the first kill of the game. So you have this. So because it's easier for you to predict what the demon's going to do at the end of the game, it's easier for you to get the save, and the save is very strong. at that stage. Because the reason they wanted to kill that player is because they didn't think the good team was going to execute them in the final 3. Because they weren't going to. And that means they did think that one of the other 2 players was the better frame candidate. And by protecting that player and forcing the demon to change their mind, the demon is now forced to make a kill they didn't want to make. We know they didn't want to make the kill because they tried to kill the player you protected. They wanted to bring you and someone else into final 3. And now they have to choose between those 2 people. And those 2 people can be a fellow minion who they were hoping to keep alive, but now they're going to sacrifice because you're the better frame. It can be a Raven Keeper who's now going to get generally game-solving information. It can be a soldier. That's a real rough for the evil team. It could be the washroom and confirm. It can be a player who was an investigator ping, who they wanted to frame as evil with someone else. Like, there's all these players who the demon doesn't want to kill that night for all sorts of reasons, and you and the demon both know that with a lot more informational certainty going into find the last kill of the game than you know going into the first kill of the game. So if you can be alive there, it's pretty fun.
It's an interesting thing about the whole meta of Towns not executing at Final 4, because it's, we'll get more information on whoever the demon kills tonight, and then you wake up in Final 3 and it's, they killed the person we thought they were getting.
Yeah,
it's like, it's obvious.
I would say, like, the one time it's interesting is not really a monk thing, but it's because if you're the monk, you're protecting that person. But sometimes there's a player everyone knows is going to be killed going into Final 3, and then they're not killed. And that can suggest that the player everyone trusted might have snuck into trust illicitly.
Yeah, maybe we got something wrong here.
So that is, like, 99% of the time, we go to sleep on Final 4 because we are being formally correct to do so. But then the thing everyone thinks is going to happen, and anyway, it's the exact same choice you would have had the final day, the previous day. But if you're the monk, that's not true anymore, because you get to protect that person, and you get to force the demon into a different endgame than they want it to be.
Yeah, that's the cool thing about the monk, is that it gets stronger as the game goes along, purely because there are less players alive as the game goes along. And so the likelihood of your saves being successful are going to increase because there are less people alive.
Even if you're, like, completely not paying attention to the game, even if you have no clue what's going on, even if you're, like, daydreaming and not knowing who's that person who's going to be killed on is, you have a 33% chance just on math that you're going to get the demon's kill right.
Love it. I love
it.
Going
into Final 4, whereas on day 1 of a 15-player game, I don't know what 1 out of 14 is off the top of my head, but it's a lot smaller than 33%.
Speaking of math, actually, the no change.
So yeah, this is my fault. I added a comment about
versus even player count.
Yeah, this is my fault.
Is the monk stronger in, and why?
It's on even player counts. I wrote this down quickly on my phone yesterday. Then I thought about it, and later was like, wait, no, I put that backwards. It's even player counts. The monk is strong. If you think about Blood on the Clocktower, there's the good team has a certain amount of executions they get to use each game, which, outside of, like, BMR stuff, effectively 2n-1 divided by 2 rounded down is the way I keep it in my head, where n is the player counts. Like, on a 12-player game, the good team gets 5 executions. They also get 5 executions in an 11-player game. In a 10-player game, they get 4 executions. In a 13 or 14-player game, they get 6 executions. In a 15-player game, they get 7 executions. The corollary of that is that you get 1 successful protection in an even player game. The first protection is an extra execution. So you go, if in a 12-player game, if someone is executed day 1, you go down to 11 players. If you protect someone night 1, you wake up on 11 players, and we can work out that 11 players and 12 players are both 5 executions left. But we already used an execution, which means now we have 6 executions total this game instead of 5. In an odd player count game, you're staying on the same modulo. So you're staying on your first protection, so it takes 2 protections to get an extra execution.
Yeah.
You're almost never gonna get the double protection, because the demon's not going to attack the same person you already saved once until they've dealt with you. So they're gonna go somewhere else.
Yeah, I feel like the ideal situation for the monk is you get, like, 1 save, like a clutch save at some point in the game, and that's basically the extent of your ability. I don't know what is the most monk saves you've ever seen in a game?
I think I might have had a very bitter demon who I got 2 monk saves on Final 4 in a row against once. But other than that, I think it's generally 1. So if you get that 1 execution in an even player count game, it gets you a whole nother execution. The 1 protection is 1 execution in an even player count game, and that's super useful. You get to execute a whole nother player. That's so good for the good team. Whereas an odd player count, you need 2 protections to get the extra execution. That's a lot harder to pull off, and you're rarely going to get it. So you just become a little bit weaker on average.
But yeah, that extra execution for town is huge. And having your ability being able to level town up to the next execution level based on player count is going to be very advantageous.
Yeah, so it just means that on even player counts, you want to be more thoughtful about who you're protecting night 1 than you need to on odd player counts. Because on odd player counts, it just doesn't matter that much, unfortunately.
Let's talk about Monk is an evil bluff. Monk is a pretty good evil bluff. The interesting thing about the monk being stronger later in the game is that you're also going to be more suspicious being alive as the monk near the end of the game, because people are going to go, why aren't you dead yet?
Yeah, why aren't you dead? Why aren't you protecting the player who the demon wanted to kill? Are both questions that are going to come up for a monk buff. I think
if you're a monk that's still alive and you haven't done a save yet, people are going to be like, oh, this ain't happening.
Yeah, especially on going into Final 3, it's going to be like, those questions are going to get raised. For that, I like Monk a little bit more as a minion bluff. And I like it a little bit more as a Star Pass bluff than I like it as a bluff that I'm intended to take the end game as the demon. But you need to be multi-directional. And the corollary of Monk being a little bit more powerful on even player counts is that on odd player counts, it doesn't really hurt you that much as the demon, to just sink a kill to sell your Monk bluff. It's like, oh no. Though I have found in groups with super advanced players, sometimes they'll be like, when a monk gets a save on odd player counts, they'll be like, well, the monk's probably evil. They know that the odd player count save is cheap, so they didn't mind doing it. They didn't mind faking it.
Yeah, because the thing about the bluffing is the monk is that you are not the monk, so you cannot save people at night, unlike, bluffing an information roll where some of those information roll bluffs, you can kind of convincing. Sometimes you can just straight up be giving truthful information or accurate information, and you can kind of ride that bluff. Can't really do that with the monk, especially as the game goes along. People are going to be questioning why you haven't saved anybody, and especially when you get later in the game, if you've got those, like you were saying earlier, the non-frames, the good players that are not suspicious, that people don't think are the demon, and then they're getting killed, and people might be looking at you like, what happened? Why didn't you save them? And really, your only possible response to that is it's drunk or poison, right?
Yeah.
A monk that's being poisoned, or you guys know, like, how we couldn't figure out the outsider count, and we think there might be that's me. I'm just the drunk monk. That's why I haven't saved anybody.
Yeah, I would say if I'm the demon bluffing monk, I am probably going to make a calculation at some point about what sort of Final 3 am I willing to live with? And a lot of the time, I think that answer for a demon bluffing monk is one where someone isn't a demon candidate. And that makes my monk bluff look better, which is going to strengthen my position versus the person who is a demon candidate more a lot of the time than killing the unframeable player is whereas killing the unframeable player is that. So it becomes a bit of another trade-off, which is, I think, if there's one thing I can convince people with thinking about Clocktower, is think of everything you do in the game as good or evil as a trade-off between 2 options and try to figure out which one is better. If it's me, the Virgin, the Fortune Teller I'm framing, and the Recluse who I'm framing going into Final 3, going into the 4 Alive night, I'll sink into a dead body once, and then the next night I'll kill the Recluse or the Fortune Teller, whoever I think is less frameable between those 2, because that's what I would do as a monk. And that's going to help me more than killing the Virgin and saying, whoops, I guess I'm the drunk. But It's going to depend. It's going to depend. Sometimes if outsider count is ambiguous and people are looking for the drunk, then sometimes failing to save the Virgin when they should have been saved is going to be very powerful for you, because then you can say, oh, I guess I'm the drunk we've been looking for.
Yeah, Monk is a tricky demon bluff. I agree that I would probably see it more as a minion bluff. However, it should be noted that, like you said, the demon can make it look like a monk happened because they can sink a kill onto a dead body. And starting on night 2, there probably is a dead body that you can sink it to. And, as the game goes along, you could say, well, I did do a monk save. I saved that one person there. But then you're going to have the same issue of the monk can't save themselves. So you're probably going to get killed in the night at some point. I'm trying to think back on the games that I've played. I don't think I've seen a monk in the final 3. It's a very uncommon final 3 role because a demon is probably going to be like scared to try to bring that bluff into a final 3. I know I would be scared if I was a demon and I saw the monk as one of the 3 roles not in play. I'm not good enough to take that. Or it's going to be a situation where I'm the monk up until I need to star pass. Then I'm a monk that got killed in the night.
Yeah. I think like the only times I've seen the monk in final 3 are times where me or someone else has tricked the demon into framing the monk by pretending not to be the monk in ways that make them frameable, and then done something and then tried to do something or failed to do something to pull back that frame. But it's because it's so strong going into that final kill, it's almost never going to be alive to do that.
And the other thing about trying to fake that a monk is in play by sinking a kill into a dead body is that you're doing the thing with adding the execution potentially that you were talking about before, is that you're giving town that extra execution to work with because you wasted a night not actually killing somebody as the demon. Is that worth it? I'm guessing probably not, generally speaking, because it's not a very good bluff for the demon, wide for the end of the game anyway.
It's generally not a good trade-off for evil. That doesn't mean you should never do it, but if you're going to do it, you need to think very hard about the trade-off you're making. If you're at the situation where your fake save will give an extra execution, you need to be very careful about it.
Anything else on monk is an evil bluff that I haven't thought of? It's definitely it's a bluff that you would think that would make sense for a demon because they are like mirror characters to one another, but because of that like end game issue, you're just not going to ever, not ever, but writing that to a final 3 is going to be a hell of a calculation. You got to like really feel safe that town isn't looking at you too close at the end of that game.
Yeah, you have to make it seem like you behave as if you were the monk, which probably means getting some late game saves in there, which that's a big risk for you. So you have to be careful with it. But I think like if you want to be a monk, carry a monk to final 3, you do need to commit to doing that, which is scary.
Yeah. Anyway, wrapping up here, I have a little rating system that I'm doing for every character here. I'm going to ask you your ratings in a second. Be prepared. For complexity, I'm giving Monk a 4 out of 10. I think there's a lot of like in-depth considerations, which is why this podcast is over an hour long. But realistically, you're just picking somebody to save at night, so there's not a lot of like, not a lot that you're like really stuck thinking about when you get woken up at night. For strength, I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think it's pretty good. I think it's a character that if you can get one save off, it's strong, and if you can get multiple saves off, it's like you're kind of winning the game for your team a bit with the executions that you're able to buy. And then as an evil bluff, I gave it a 6 out of 10, which might be a little high because it's not a bluff that demons can take as easily as minions, but I think it's a bluff that can definitely mess with town, especially if you're able to use that monk bluff to kind of like fish out actually strong characters from town by saying you're the monk. But I'm curious what you think. So complexity, strength, and power as an evil bluff are the 3 ratings I got here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty complex. It's the simplicity of what it's doing mechanically is, I think, hides a little bit the depth of what it can consider strategically.
So where would you put it, like 1 out of 10 complexity with the context of like, every other character that we have in Clocktower?
Yeah, I've actually done this. So I'm just going to...
That's incredible. I love that you've done this.
Pull up my tier list quickly so I can double check where it was.
I've had people recommend to me to do tier lists, and I'm trying to think if I want to do it like after I've gone over all the Trouble Brewing roles and then just do a tier list after that. It feels like jumping the gun,
Yeah.
doing the tier list too early before you actually like talk about everything.
We did like deep long series on the strategic depth level tier list of every character. So let me just pull up our episode. I think I had Monk as an S tier strategic complexity character. So having committed to that previously, I will happily say it's a 10 out of 10. Its simplicity belies that you have choices both about who you protect and how you want to present yourself to town, and different things you can do on both avenues, and there's no one right answer, which is to me the highest form of complexity.
Yeah, it definitely seems like, based on like our conversation in this podcast, that it is a high skill ceiling character. That like it's a character that the better you are at Clocktower, or more informed you are in general, the better you're going to play Monk versus a newer player.
Yeah, but I think it's also just something that you can play differently at both beginner and high levels of
It's
Clocktower.
malleable.
It's malleable, which to me is complex. For strength, it's so dependent on player count. On even player count, I would probably put it in the 6 to 7 range. On odd player count, probably closer to the 3 or 4 range, just because the different valence of the protection, whether it gives me an extra execution automatically or not.
Yeah, it also has the downside of it's possible you do nothing in the whole game. You just don't save anybody, and you're sitting there at the Grimoire Veil being like, I'm sorry, guys.
Yeah.
I don't know what to tell you.
I would probably put it about 5 or 10 in strength, which is ideally where I want to see Townsfolk. I want to see Townsfolk sort of at a roughly 5 out of 10 level strength. So I'm happy with it there.
That's true. What does a 9 out of 10 strength Townsfolk look like? It's probably a character that's overtuned.
It's probably a character on a custom script where it doesn't belong.
And then Evil Bluff, I put 6 out of 10. Maybe that's too high. Also, I like, based on like our Evil Bluff conversation just now, it feels like, maybe I was overrating it a little bit there.
I would say 5 or 6.
Yeah,
is where I'd put it as an Evil Bluff.
But yeah, I don't know. Any final thoughts? I think the Monk is a cool character. I didn't mention this at all in the pod. I have not played the Monk once in a game. It's not for lack of trying. I'm playing a shitload of Trouble Brewing right now, and I can't stop picking minions, and I can't stop picking outsiders. It's like, it's a curse that I can't get some of these Townsfolk roles to get some like reps in. But the Monk is fun, and I'm really excited to now like try some of the stuff that you mentioned in this podcast that I can try out in my own games and then fail spectacularly.
Yeah. Oh, it's a character that has grown on me a lot over time. It was a character that I really didn't like when I first started playing Clocktower. It was something where I would be like, yeah, I'm just happy to nominate a version so I don't have to do Monk stuff.
Oh, damn.
But it's become a character that has grown on me, and it's now like an old friend that I miss when I don't get to be the Monk very often.
Yeah, it's an exciting player because you could see the potential of it, right? You could see the Monk is just predicting everything that the demon is trying, and you're going to have a demon there saying, what am I supposed to do? Nobody's dying at night when I pick them.
Yeah,
I'm sure that game's existed at some point. In reality, it ends up being like between 0 and 1 saves a game, which sometimes that's enough to win the town the entire thing, that extra execution.
Yeah, its average save number is 0, or its modal save number is 0. Which, do with that what you will.
But yeah, I think that's going to do it for our Monk strategy guide episode here. Emma, thanks for coming on and diving deep into the Monk with us today.
Yeah, no problem.
Where can people find you online?
Yeah, I host the TPI's America-based stream every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. Eastern. And then I also have a strategy podcast called Grim Scenarios, which I started several years ago. We did, for a long time, what we focused was on simulated actual play, where we talked through what you can think about while you're doing things. Then we did this big, long tier list episode series where we tiered all the characters for their strategic depth specifically, not how fun they were, not how much we liked them, but their strategic depth. And then we did and we're currently working through a sort of storytelling, playing, bluffing guide for the experimental characters, which has been a lot of fun to record. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/hitting its Grim Scenarios gets you there, but I don't actually know for sure.
Yeah, we'll have links for all the stuff in the description.
And then also wherever the podcast you can find wherever you get your podcasts. I use Apple Podcasts, but Spotify, Amazon, I think we also have. And Grim Scenarios also operates a Twitch channel, twitch.tv/Grim Scenarios, where me and some other people will stream Clocktower games every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Eastern and Saturday morning at, I think, 11 a.m. Eastern. I don't live in Eastern time zone, and my time zone is not consistent to Eastern time zone because I live in a place that doesn't recognize daylight savings time, so I don't actually always know what the correct Eastern time zone is. I just know what it is in my time, but I believe those are correct. So we post some of our actual plays up on YouTube, our YouTube channel as well.
Yeah, we'll have all your stuff in the description of this pod if people want to check you out. Grim Scenarios was like one of the first Clocktower like guide channels that I was able to find when I was doing my research a few months ago before starting this channel. And I saw that you guys were doing the experimental characters, and I went to listen to a couple episodes, and I felt my head spinning. I was like, they are referencing stuff with the assumption that I know what they're talking about, and I do not know what they're talking about.
That's a good note. Yeah. So a long time ago, someone named Andrew Nathanson did something very similar to what you're doing now, called Cult of the Clock Tower.
Yeah, I love Cult of the Clock Tower. I listened to all of it.
Yeah, and we sort of wanted to do a continuation of Cult for the experimental characters because Andrew didn't want to continue Cult unless the expansion scripts got released, because he really strongly believes, as do I, that characters should exist in the context of a script.
It's certainly easier to talk about them in the context of a specific script. Outside, I can't imagine what podcast prep looks like when you have to consider all. How many characters have been released, including the experiment? Is it 100 yet? Is it over 100?
It's well over 100.
Crazy.
So we talked to Andrew and we said, hey, would you be offended if we sort of did this Cult of the Clock Tower sort of continuation thing for the experimental characters? And he said, no, that's fine. He might do it later when the expansion scripts are actually released, but he didn't mind us doing it because, we thought it was something that people might find useful, but it's not for new Clocktower players. Our older podcast episodes, I think we start with some Trouble Brewing ones that I think can be really useful for people who are nervous about how do I play this game. But our most recent ones, please don't listen to those if you've never played. Certainly all 3 base scripts and done some work with the custom characters already. They're not meant for beginners. They're meant for people who are as dementedly obsessed with this game as I am.
Yeah, absolutely. I look forward to getting there one day. I'm content with Trouble Brewing at the moment.
Yeah. I mean, it's the best script. It's the script I enjoy playing the most. Well, second most. Or tied for most.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. It's the best script. Anyway, you guys can find Clocktower Academy on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Pods, anywhere you get your podcasts. You can also check us out on TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. We also have a Discord server that I'm working on, getting people in there. So eventually I can start doing my own online games, starting to learn the online tool little by little here. I'm playing only in person is cool. And then I watch every other Clocktower channel it's just that same online app over and over. So I got to get in on that eventually. I know
it is so much easier to record Clocktower content online, and that's so unfortunate.
I know. I'm doing it the hard way. I don't know if you've seen any my short form content where I'm doing the explainer videos. That's my actual phone camera on my actual grimoire in a light box. I'm not doing it digitally.
Yeah.
Way more work. I should not have made that decision, but
and
we're past the point of no return on that one.
If you in-person actual play is the dream, but it is so hard to make work.
That's fine. I've been talking to the guys from Mount Unpleasant a little bit. I told them, I was like, I would love to do what you're doing. It's on my list at some point.
Yeah, you have to commit to doing it with a local group, or you have to be professionals, and that's hard for a lot of content creators because part of the reason why we love the game is we've met people all over the world from it.
Yeah, it's tricky. Yeah, I know. Doing the scheduling for this podcast, I'm recording at all times of the day, all times of the week, because people are all over the world trying to get in on this.
Yeah. Well, pleasure what you're doing.
Yeah. Thanks again for coming on. That's going to do it for this episode of Clocktower Academy. Class dismissed.